Hello and welcome to a new episode of our Prototype You Talent interview series. Today an interview in English with Sander Markiet, and as you may see in the video, Sander is not next to me. We're doing this through a Zoom meeting. Sander, my question to you, and then you can maybe also share where you're at. Where can people know you from?
Well, people can know me from various different platforms, but I run a boutique consulting firm in Zurich, Switzerland. So most of the people know me through my consulting that I do now or in the past. Consulting focused on leadership and talent development, specifically focused on energy management, lifestyle development, and purpose. Furthermore, I work for the University of St. Gallen, the MBA program, where I run the career development programs or courses and teaches for our MBA students on how to get the best out of their career. So that's what I do. So both in Zurich and St. Gallen, based in Switzerland, which is why we are not necessarily together.
Yes. Well, sounds like some interesting work and enough to talk about today, I guess. So just starting with our first question, what does personal development mean to you?
Personal development to me, it's, well, if I take a step back, it's what is life really about? And I like to have a perspective from Sigmund Freud. I don't necessarily agree with all his philosophies, but I do agree with one particular philosophy. It is that life is best lived when you have work and love. I think those two components come into play with every human being. And everything that contributes to either work and or love is an act of personal development, as well as the development of others in work, obviously for the added value that you deliver to others. But in love, it's also what you give to others and receive. So every act in work and love is supposed to be something for others as well as for your own development. So hopefully that, to an extent, allows what personal development means to me.
And then love is a bit broader than a romantic relationship, I guess.
Yes. So love is, in that regard, yeah, traditionally we think of love as in that partner relationship, but love is far broader than that. It starts with self-love, called Love 0.0 from Barbara Fredrickson, positive psychology research, and then 1.0, which is the traditional notion of love, is that romantic love between man and women, or man, women and women, or however you want to frame that. Then it's 2.0, which is a fascinating one, which is every moment of interaction that you can have with anyone. These micro moments of positivity resonance is that small happiness, that smile which you give to the cash register, just saying hi to your neighbor. All of that are acts of love.
Yeah.
But also then there's a love in a broader sense, is the love for the universe, the world, and all those different aspects.
Nice. I like that. Work and love.
Work and love. And then for me, so work and love, those are the cornerstone. But in order to have work and love done well, is you need to have energy. You need to have, on the personal side, you need to be able to give to love, and you need to be able to give to work. In order to do that, you need to have energy. So what that means is you need to be able to take care of yourself, of the fundamentals of yourself. That means eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, posture. All of these factors come into play into how can we show up better for ourselves in order to show up better for other people in our lives.
Yeah, cool. Speaking of work, what was the toughest decision you ever had to make at work, and how did you go about making that decision, that tough decision?
Unfortunately, I can't go into too many details on the decision itself, because it can cause reputational damage to to that particular client. But I think the toughest decision in general are decisions that that go against or potentially go against your line of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
For things where you personally don't stand behind or you don't believe in, and someone is trying to go against that. So in this particular case, it was a potential client who offered a significant amount of money for one of my services, but I didn't stand behind what the client was doing, nor what the client was aiming to do with the services that I would provide.
Okay.
However, and I found in myself that it was such a substantial amount of money that I say, well, with this amount of money, I can basically have my whole year of, I can cover my whole year basically. So the decision was in that sense challenging, but I looked at myself and said, well, for how much money will I let go of my integrity? And I said, well, I should never be able to let go of my integrity, right? That's, for me, one of the most fundamental things on how to live, is that our sense of character and our values. And I asked myself a question, which is, if I look back at this in 5 years' time, and I asked myself, what decision would have made me proud? What would I have done? And then it became very clear that for me, it's everything needs to be in line with a sense of integrity. And therefore, the decision was clear that I decided not to go forward with that client.
Yeah, hard decision, but sounds like a good one. Is this how you make most of these tough decisions, that you really take that step back and look at where do I stand for, what do I think is of value and importance? I understand that most tough decisions are not necessarily involved with integrity, as this specific example, but is this what you usually do when there's a tough decision coming up in terms of your career or personal life? You moved countries, so those are tough decisions, I guess.
Yeah, and I very much believe in. So again, if I take a step back into what life is all about, I'm a big fan of Stoicism, and in the Stoic philosophy, they say the good life is lived with something they call, when you live with eudaimonia, which means to live with a good soul. And in order to live with a good soul, they say you need to live with arete. And arete means to live with excellence, to be the best version of yourself possible, moment to moment to moment. And in order to do that, you need to live with your values. You need to have an integrated sense of who you are, what you stand for, and how you want to live, have a philosophy for life. So yes, with all decisions I make or I want to make in order to live a good life, I need to see, is it in line with who I am, with my sense of identity on how do I want to live, and my values that are connected to that. But the challenge is most decisions have to go on the fly. Most of the time we don't have that time to really go like, well, is this actually in line with my values all of a sudden? So most decisions just have to go fast and fast. And
Sure.
But those are usually smaller decisions. And sometimes for the big decisions, I do tend to take some time off and say, okay, why am I doing this? Or what's the bigger cause? What are the pros and cons in the big side of looking at this?
Yeah, and in order to take that step back, and maybe you can do that in a split second by now, and when that decision has to be made on the spot, okay, do you have some practical advice to a viewer or a listener? Because in order to do so, you need to know, this is who I am, this is where I stand for, this is what I need to do or not do in order to live that good life. And that is a very personal description, I would say. What is a good life to you?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have some practical tip or advice in order to figure this out? Because I feel that many people don't know this actually, or have never thought about it at least.
Yeah, it's and that's very true. Most people haven't thought about this in all ages of life, whether they're young or teenagers, or even with C-level people, CEOs that I work with, and I ask them about their values, and they say, "Well, I haven't really thought about this." And but the interesting part is everyone goes through life by acting upon our values, even without us being aware of this. So coming back to your original question of some practical tips, one of the things is to have key questions and key mantras in life. So one is, what would make me proud? I think that's always, I think, a good question to ask yourself. Will this decision make me proud if I continue with this decision? Would I make the same decision in a year time from now? Would I have made the same decision in a year ago? Those things I think are really helpful. Then another question that is helpful is, what do I want? It sounds like a really basic question, but what do I want out of this situation? And it could be in work or in love. Let's just say you're having an argument could be your spouse, but it could also be with your colleague. And by asking yourself the question, what do I want from this right now? Do I want to have an argument with someone? Or do I really want that we both feel good about this conversation and then it leads to something better where we can both prosper or learn something from that? And by simply asking yourself, what do you want? It's a small reflection moment. In that moment, it's like, well, actually, I don't want to have an argument right now. I want us to both meaningful contribute to something bigger or whatever that in that realm that is. And then, so having key questions, I think that's one. And then the other thing is having mantras. So having guiding mantras of who you want to be. So we all have a sense of identity, whether we are aware of that or not. We have a sense of identity of how we want to live and who we are. And by getting clear on our identity and in the sense of who you are in energy, work, and love, those different components, helps to mitigate the questions that you need to ask on those small moments when you're interacting with someone. So to give you a more practical example, if your sense of identity is saying, I'm a person that is vibrant, healthy, energetic, and you need to make a decision on while you're at work, and you have a decision to make between really simple, basic, you have to choose between an apple or that Snickers bar, but it's 3 p.m. and actually feeling low on energy, but you have a deep sense of, okay, well, would my identity, a healthy, vibrant, energetic person, what would he or she go for? And that really helps us say, well, a healthy person would obviously go for the apple in that case. So having those guiding mantras say, well, I'm a healthy, energetic person, or whatever that is for someone, and that is individual. I think that really helps to find that cornerstone of who you want to be, how do you want to live, and in order to make better decisions of that are in line with your values and those things.
Yeah, it's all about setting your boundaries actually, and knowing what they are and living according them.
Yes.
In our work methodology, we have this exercise which is called view on life and view on work, which is all about writing down maybe one big mantra of 250 words approximately, like this is where I stand for. And obviously I've done that myself, and I often think back to this. I don't know the text exactly by heart, but I know the essence. And with some decisions I know, and this is what you just shared with huge amount of money, but it goes against some ethical values you have. Like then, if you can be honest with yourself, it's easy to say. In the end, it's easy to say no because you know it will influence you in a good way, that decision.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I want to riff on is what you say is if you're honest with yourself. And that's one of the things that's so challenging from time to time, right? Yeah. It is it really what you want or not? And how to be in integrity with ourselves is sometimes more challenging than we want. Yeah. Because there's so many influence from outside and inside that sort of go against on how most of us want to live. So it's an interesting concept to think about more and more for each individual, obviously.
Yeah. Ego comes in place, and then
yeah, exactly. There's so many things. It's
you don't know what to do. So you've been talking about some things, that decisions you made, and how this person developed, what it means to you. A question that we ask many guests is, with what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
And if you want, if it makes it a bit easier, you can also opt for the 5 years ago option.
I'm not sure if that would make it easier. I'm actually thinking more 15 years ago, because 10 years ago I was already on, to an extent, I was already on the path that I'm now. I have two things in mind. One is to take life less seriously. Because everything that's stressing you out right now, in 5 or 10 years time, you're going to laugh about that, right? So it's like, you're not going to be stressed about that at time. So why stress about it now? So I think that's really helpful. And another thing is, if you trust yourself, which is not always easy, but if you trust yourself, then things will work out. Things will. One of the beautiful things that I've seen in the last 5 years, I would especially say, is the more I am in integrity with myself, and I only know this because I was not in integrity with myself previously, but knowing how to be more in integrity with myself, I tend to just draw people that are also more in integrity with themselves, and people that feel the energy and the zest and enthusiasm, and I just seem to attract more and more of those people. So in both work and in private life, and I think that's the beauty of saying, hey, just trust yourself and listen less to what other people say and do, which is very hard and very difficult, obviously, but trust yourself more and more, and then it will work out, basically.
Don't worry too much.
Exactly. Don't worry too much. It'll work out.
Yeah.
Again, very stoic approach as well. It's you can only control the things that are in your control, and don't worry about the things that are not in your control. Yeah.
It's I've read about this stoic that you're referring to a couple of times now. It's hard to read. I would say it's really interesting. I tried to a couple of times. Marcus Aurelius, I think, is one of the writers. It's a different text than I'm used to reading, but it's interesting stuff. Next question. I have a question here on my phone, and I want to take something from your website, and that's why I will read it out loud, because I have a question on that. On your website, you write, work and private life is an important relationship that is closely connected. How we show up and feel at work or in privately greatly impacts the other. I really like this holistic view, and we already touched upon this topic briefly. But if we take this to organizations, it's more like a holistic view on how people feel, how an employee feels. What's your opinion on in your work? What do you notice? How do organizations deal with this? Because I often, I leave the question like that, because otherwise I might influence your answer already.
I would say it's very culturally dependent. So a lot of the work I've been doing over the past few years is in Scandinavia.
Okay.
Where in Scandinavia, if it's a bit more feminine culture or more feminine oriented, which are more soft skills, soft values are integrated more into the work life compared to more Germanic countries. Or the more south you go. So but in general, in Europe and in the Western world, I would say that holistic view is not there yet, or not to the extent where I think it really adds value. To speak in more business terms, if we look at productivity, the human productivity has stagnated over the last 20 years. If you look at the amount of hours that we work in combination with the output that we are working more hours, but we're not producing more output. On the human side, most of our productivity has come from innovation in technology. and that human component is not there. So why is this the case? Is in a lot of cases, it's because we put so much emphasis on that what traditional work side of that technology driven components and not on the human factors that run into play. And in the human factors that run into play is that every human being comes with a full package. You cannot just have your passion, your energy, your enthusiasm for work and not also bring your fears, your doubts, your emotional side, your private elements as well to that mix. So as an organization, it's really important to say both components. If I want to have the beautiful components of that passion and that enthusiasm from someone, I also need to acknowledge that someone also comes with other elements, and providing that platform to have discussions or dialogues about that is often just what's needed to have that people have that sense of value, being valued. And that being valued leads to, in general, people feeling more or happier. And as we know, is the more happy someone is, the higher their productivity is. So all of these things come back around.
Yeah. What are reasons for organizations not really focusing on this part?
Well, I think one of the big reasons it's scary to talk about some of the things that are unknown, that are things that are behind the mask that we have. Because if everything that you can see, you can talk about, there's behaviors that you say, okay, I like this or I don't like that. But the mental side, the emotions, the doubts, the fears, we don't see those things. So we are generally not willing to touch upon those things because we don't know what that might trigger.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why we all, or not all, but a lot of people, so leaders, are pretending this mask of I am this perfect human being and nothing can touch me. And if I do this, I'm going to be a star. But that's not the reality, because we all have also other elements just behind that perfect facade that we have.
Yeah.
So I think it's this courage that to have those conversations and providing the platform for leaders, especially to show that they are emulating this behavior and these thought processes and having dialogues about this. Because if the leader is not doing this, then no one's going to follow.
No. Because
the consciousness of the leader is the consciousness that drives other people in the organization. That's true in organizations, as in business organization, but also in families or in nonprofit organizations or in sports industry or sports club, whatever it is, that the leader's consciousness just trickles down to everyone in that organization. So the leader has to be the front runner and to say, I am who I am with all the beautiful characteristics that I have, but I'm also not always perfect. And the interesting part, what we see is the more someone does that, the more someone opens up, the more someone invites to be seen. Yeah. And this is to a large extent what we all want. We want to be seen, and we want to see other people. And in order to be seen, it means we need to be able to open up. And that's I think one of the crucial role as a leader to say those elements, and therefore allowing to be seen, and therefore allowing other people to follow that particular vision or belief, or just that human side of being a leader.
Yeah, so it kind of starts with being vulnerable within organizations, and the leader needs to lead that, and then
exactly
the rest will naturally feel space to open up.
Yeah, and I think with vulnerability, I had interesting discussions with some of my students where we have particular classes on what does it take to be a leader, and one of the core components that we talk about is vulnerability. Well, the vulnerability, just for the sake of vulnerability, is not where we want to play, because then it's just people trying to look for attention. Yeah. But it's vulnerability that is connected to power, and not in the traditional sense of power, but also performance, right? If someone is not performing and showing that someone is on the top of his or her level and his or her game, but is so on the low side, but is showing vulnerability, someone is just usually trying to seek attention.
Yeah.
So it is this combination of vulnerability and power and performance that really creates that leader that we want to emulate. Yeah.
Would you say that because I think now listening to you, something that I often think about is that traditionally the best employee gets the promotion because he needs to be compensated for performing that well, and after promotion means becoming manager or leader, and then you have the best employee becoming a leader, which, if you think about it in that sense, doesn't make sense at all. Are people skills, how much more important are they if you talk about leadership?
Yeah,
because knowing how people work, it's part of our work, so we have obviously some knowledge about that, but there's many people not diving into these topics naturally because of their job.
Yeah. And I think so short answer, it's fundamental. And when we look at work traditionally, when we look at work from 70, 80 years ago, it's always been about productivity, a conveyor belt, producing, becoming more efficient. And that mentality has just been keep on going. But being efficient is not the element that we want to focus on when working with people. Then we want to become effective. And becoming effective starts with understanding, well, first of all, starts with understanding yourself, and then starts with understanding others, and then utilizing that. So within the work I do with MBA students, this is basically a lot of the work I do, it is on that human component. We have more business courses such as marketing, finance, accounting, all those elements. And the realm where I am steering more and more MBA students is, well, if you want to become that manager or that leader, where I think there is a difference, that they need to start understanding that the human component is critical for becoming a good leader. Because in the end, if you're leading 50 people, but no one wants to be led by you, then it becomes really challenging to perform. And therefore that best performance is not because of all the nuts and bolts of how the technical part works, but it's because you know how to lead people and how to successfully work with people in combination with work. So it's also not just the people skills, it's a combination of people skills with performing and knowing what you're doing.
Yeah. In relation to that, so you work, you coach, you train, and you consult organizations, and you want to have behavioral change that becomes something sustainable on an individual and organizational level, as I understood that from reading on your website, which is obviously vital. I mean, you can have a conversation with somebody can totally understand it, feels inspired, and the next day it's totally gone. Can you give a few examples how you try to make it something that sustains?
Yeah. There are various aspects towards doing this. One is, so specifically in the realm of consulting and even in leadership consulting or talent management, a lot of the consultants, what they do is they assess the problems, and very adequately they assess the problems. They come to the organization, they do a 1-2 day training, and then they leave, and then they say, all right, our work is done, you take over. But you can get inspired by a 1 or 2 day training and assessment and coaching but that's not where the change happens.
No.
The change happens in the hard work after that. So one of the elements is to do it for a sustainable amount of time or a sustainable duration, that people are actually integrating the different aspects that are required. And that's often not the sexy part of work, because after that initial buzz of, okay, let's do this, we're all excited, comes the first obstacle. And it's like, oof, well, it didn't really go as according to plan. And how do you deal with those components? And coaching comes into play, but also having leaders having frequent conversations about these aspects. So we keep reiterating the elements that we want to integrate, and we want to integrate and want to integrate. So that duration is a key factor. Then another one is when, and depends on when we look at an individual level or an organizational level, but on an individual level, as we just mentioned, we all have our internal belief system, our mind, our values that we need to address, and our identity that we need to start working on. And then connect to that is our behaviors. So often what we do is we only look at one element, and that's on the behavioral element, but we don't take into account the belief system or the motivation or the values that are connected to that. So we need to tap into both these elements, but the same is applied to organizations. So in organizations, when we talk about the internal level, we talk about the culture of the organization. How are we working with the culture, the value system that's ingrained in the culture, the atmosphere, the motivation of the people in the culture? What are we doing on elements on that aspect? But then equally important is we need to look at the external components, as in, how do people actually show up? What are the policies that are in play? Are they connected to the internal components? So, for instance, if you want to change people's approach to work or motivation, but you have a policy that focus on bonus structures more so than actually leading into the fundamental aspects of intrinsic motivation, there's a disconnect. So I'm not necessarily saying bonus structures are bad. There are definitely good elements to that. But we need to see everything needs to be in accordance with each other. And that's on an individual level, but also on an organizational level. And those are definitely different aspects that we need to keep in play. And then reiterating and continually working on that. And that's on an individual level. You want to make a change into your diet or your lifestyle. You can try to run a marathon in the first week, but after 2 weeks you're going to get injured, right? So it's if you're not running normally. So we need to have this gradual build up over time, and having that humbleness and say, okay, this is a process that takes time, and we need to keep facilitating and iterating those different components.
Yeah, I guess there's a huge challenge for you in convincing your potential clients that they need to invest such amount of time, because if you invest this time in people, it means they cannot do their work and earn money for the company. Is that an obstacle you often face?
Well, obviously, because one of the elements in organizations is for most of the case is how to get the most amount of value with the least amount of paying for it, right?
Yeah.
And having the most amount of value in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
But that sort of goes against a lot of the fundamental core principles on how to create sustainable change.
Yeah.
So it is about having that dialogue and really trying to figure out what is it that people want to do in an organization. Is it that they want to have sustainable behavioral change or not? And if so, then science is very clear on these different aspects. And then I tell them, well, if you want to have someone just comes in and does a motivational speech, you can have that. But unfortunately, that's not going to be with me. I can do that, but that's not going to lead to behavioral change.
No.
So
it's hard.
Exactly. So it's just having that honest conversation and dialogue with them and saying, well, you can do that, but I can almost guarantee you're not going to see the changes that you want to see sustainably.
Yeah.
And then it's always up to them to say, I mean, I can only share what I know from my work, the science, obviously. And then it's up to people to make that decision if this is something that they want to invest in. Yeah, but it is a challenge. Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. So speaking of changing or developing people, leading, managing, we touched upon all these aspects. I want to touch upon the topic developing people within an organization. So you have talented people within your organization. If you look at talent development in a broader essence, what do you see happening in a good and a bad sense?
I think there are various elements. If we look at so again, if I'm taking a step back, when we look at talent development, there are multiple components that are connected to that. It starts with, for organizations, it starts to have, when they need to know is what are the problems that they will face in 5 or 10 years time on the elements that we need to develop. So if we have a better understanding of that's the skill set, or that's the people or the mindset that we want to have and cultivate, we need to think ahead. Most organizations don't know what it is that they want. So we need to start having a better understanding of that is, and having honest and sometimes difficult conversations about this, because it takes time and you don't figure it out in one go. And when we start to have those conversations, then we can start to see, okay, what is the skill set or the development areas that we need to work on right now? And in order to have that, we need to have a sort of an assessment. And and that's that bridge between, okay, if this is what we want, how do we know if we're actually going more towards that? And that is that assessment. So one of the positive things that I see more and more in organizations is that they have different assessments to figure out, are we in line with those things that we want to have? Not necessarily to the extent that if they're going the right way, that's a different story, but they're having more and more assessments and monitoring. And I'm not saying monitoring is always good, but it just creates an aspect of, are we leading into the right direction?
Yeah.
So I think that's an element in talent development that is going right. Then another component where I think they need to focus on more is what we basically, our first part of our conversation is this holistic development. Is that organizations are still too much fixed on pertaining this mask. And if we just focus on productivity, just becoming more efficient and time management, then someone will automatically become good at something that he or she is doing, and not having those conversations about your private life, for instance, or how you feel, or what motivates you, or what excites you. Those conversations, I think, are definitely aspects that still need to be integrated more and more, both in organizations as well as in university setting. Another component where, if I look at society in a whole, where it becomes more challenging, is actually two components. So it's technology. So we use technology for a force of good, but we also see more and more, and in the work that I do with people, where I do lifestyle development, we monitor people, or we assess people over a period of a week time, and we can see how they're doing on their overall lifestyle throughout the day, but also throughout the night. And we see a lot of people are just using their smartphone or work until midnight, trying to get a good night's sleep, but they only sleep 5 hours. They don't get that quality and that amount of sleep that they need. The next day they wake up and not feeling energized, or because they're not energized, they don't have that focus and productivity that they need. And then it becomes this iterative cycle, because in the end of the day, they're so tired that they want to numb themselves out. What they do, they binge flits on Netflix, they're not eating right, those different elements, and then it leads to having a poor amount of sleep, and then that whole cycle comes back around. So that's I think, conversation that, or not just conversation, I think it's a responsibility to an extent for educational institutes as well as organization and the individual to focus on more on those different aspects.
Yeah, get the fundamentals right.
Sorry?
Get the fundamentals right.
Exactly. Get the fundamentals right,
Yeah.
because we're so increasing our technological advancement, but we're decreasing our human capabilities that it's in par with each other. So we need to focus more on that human element. So the second part, what is that side of fundamentals about technology? So having a better understanding of technology, and that technology is not using us, but we're using technology for us.
Yeah. I really like when you talk about this in terms of responsibility. I think it was Volkswagen who blocked their work email from 8 p.m.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. I mean, it's or at least in the sense of that you don't. I'm not necessarily saying you should definitely block it at 8 p.m. But at least that you say you can't send it, right? Because the problem is when people send it, if your boss sends something after 8, then for a lot of people, they feel the responsibility, oh, I need to read it and I need to react to that. And I think that comes back to the leader again, saying, hey, just because I do it, don't necessarily do it. But that is in the old notion of don't do as I do as I say. But that doesn't work, right? As leaders, we need to be exemplars and show up with, and that is, you all know that as a parent, right? When you become a father or a mother for the first time, is children don't listen to what you say; they imitate your behavior. Right? So, and this is the same in leaders, for leaders. So we need to focus on becoming better exemplars. And I think having, to that extent, having also different policies as organizations is the right way, but we also should not take away the responsibility from the individuals themselves.
No, of course not. So coming back to your the first part of your answer, in short, I think what you meant is an organization needs to know where they stand for, where they want to go in the future, and then obviously look at their the group of employees. Where are they now, and how do they fit in that future path, and what needs to be developed, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very important step to take to look into the future, especially with the technological development that you see. So once an organization knows that, what's a way to go to develop these people to make sure that they also stay ahead of all kind of developments within the organization and outside, because they need to develop themselves in a way.
Yeah, obviously. I think there are many different components. One of the components is we talk a lot about innovation in the technological sense, but I think we should also start talking about innovation in the more development sense and the human component as well. So what is the latest science on, for instance, positive psychology, saying on how can we develop people better and start to integrate those different elements, such as gratitude, such as meditation, which is becoming more of a factor, but also using various technological enhancement to develop people. So I use the Aura Ring to measure my sleep, but we also see different components in work where they use technological advancement to create development for people. So having that interaction of play of, again, that technological side and that human side, with understanding that what does it take to where do we want to go, have that critical understanding of, we have this gap right now, how do we want to fill that? And I don't think there's a one size fit all solution. I think everyone needs to find out for him or herself what that is. But having more dialogues about that and training people and coaching people, and I think a crucial element is not to have it in only the training field, but bring it down to the work floor, is to teach and educate and coach people to coach other people, to lead other people better. Because otherwise people are integrating that, but only for themselves and not using that knowledge forward. So I think everything needs to ultimately come down to, how does it impact the workflow? How are you showing up better, so you are enabling other people to become better.
Yeah, learning from and with people and thanking them, having that gratitude, which you mentioned.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So my next question is more related to your work at the university. Um, do you notice any difference in terms of how they look at these topics that we are discussing, and the people that you meet, the CEOs that you meet in your more consulting coaching work from your business?
So wait, can you repeat that exactly?
So there's probably some age difference on average
Yeah,
in people
definitely.
that you work with in the MBA course and the people that you work with when you consult organizations, and then they're the leaders, CEOs. All these topics that we're discussing, do you see any differences in how people look at this uh, personal development of employees, all these topics? Do you notice any differences, or is that hard to say?
Well, the interesting element that I see is that with more senior leaders, they start to um, understand the aspects of that personal development much more than MBA. So MBA students, where we're talking about average age of 30, 3 to 5 years of work experience, first leadership experience, compared to some of the C-level or CEOs that I speak with 25, 30 years experience,
Yeah.
is they know, so the CEOs, they know is, if I want to improve my organization, I need to start with improving myself. Where on with MBAs, I still see very much, I need to get good grades, and I need to focus on, if I get my marketing and business and accounting and finance aspect right, I'm going to be a good performer, and that will gradually get myself better, which is, to an extent, it's true as well. But it's also that requires that human component. And within the conversation that I have, I see the MBA students, either 1 full year or 2 years, is having them with recurring feedback and sessions, having them understand the different aspects of personal development, which is not a fluffy element at all. It's helping them to see how they can improve themselves, and then also looking back on, hey, where were you 2 months ago? Where were you 3 months ago? Have you seen that development for yourself? And self-development is, for me, equally developing skills in marketing, in business and finance and accounting. That's also personal development.
Sure, yeah.
But having that, looking back at those different elements and seeing that it's all development. It's all development towards your career and your work and love, as said earlier. That is a component. And I would say most MBAs don't necessarily have that perspective when they enter the program. But throughout the program, they start to understand it's becoming more of a factor that if they want to succeed as becoming better leaders, not necessarily managers or high performance, only on, if you're focusing on the high performance in one aspect, if you want to become better leaders, they need to become more serious and start to act more on those personal development aspects as well.
Yeah. Do you think there's a shift going on, that there's more attention to these topics than 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, definitely. So when I was asked to take this position at the university, I was a little bit surprised, because the person that has asked me, she knows that I'm so much focused on the holistic principles and development of people, where traditionally I thought the MBA is all about just the business skills. So there is overall more and more attention to, in the Western world, to developing people overall. And that's in educational institute. I think we can do a lot more and a lot better things as well. But we see more and more focus on this. So at the University of St. Gallen, where I work in the MBA program, roughly 40% of the curriculum is focused on the personal development side. which is compared to traditional MBA programs where it's maybe 5 or 10% max, where we spend a significant amount of time and energy with the students to help them develop themselves on that personal aspect. And that, I think that is something that will just keep on going more and more forward and forward.
Yeah. It kind of surprised me that you mentioned that the older generation, the more experienced leaders, see the importance of this sooner or more than the younger MBA students that you were talking about. It, to me, this whole shift maybe in mentality, maybe it's a bit too, I make it too big now, but has also to do maybe with some difference in generations. But in what you mentioned there, it's not like that.
Well, one of the elements I think that for me particularly where I see is I only work with CEOs that want to work on their personal development as well, right?
Yeah.
So
there's a bias there.
So there is, so yeah, I have to say there is that bias. So I can't generalize that in an overall, that accounts for all CEOs and CFOs and all people that I work with. And that's probably, so if I take a step back, that's probably not that case, but at least for the people that I work with, they understand that if I want to help the organization, I need to start with developing myself first and taking that seriously.
Yeah. If we look at the future, so this development that's going on will keep on developing. What do you think it will look like in 5 years' time, and what's the role of leadership, HR in that?
So one of the elements that when we look at business that is, and what we touched upon is technology and algorithms. I think Yuval Noah Harari said in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century that the number one word that's going to be in the 21st century is algorithms. That everything that can be run through an algorithm will be run through an algorithm. So that technological aspect will continue to grow and grow more and more, which means an aspect as HR and leaders and educational institutes, we need to help people become more aware of what does that mean, how to build in algorithms, but equally important, what are some of the things that computers cannot do that people can do? And there we look at the emotional intelligence component and creativity, problem solving, and those different aspects that we need to focus on more and more as leaders, as HR. And that ties in a little bit what I mentioned earlier, where I think HR's role is helping people develop other people more and helping them. So HR needs to, or I think needs to step away from just purely the administrative side, but become more of a coach to people. So that changes the nature of HR, I think, to that extent, where HR becomes more trained in how they can support people more than just a function that people sometimes look negatively against because it's just, well, I need to create the reporting, I need to do my yearly assessment, just because I need to have that conversation. And then, so having that more coaching role, I think that's a crucial element of HR and leaders.
Yeah, so people skills will become more and more important because of technology.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned this. People need to start to coach other people. You need skills for that, obviously. I had last week, 2 weeks ago, I had a client meeting where it's a big company and they invite people to go in a coach training to become on a base level coach. So now in this organization, there are many people with coaching skills, which is, I think, is great development, and perfectly in line with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, fantastic to see that more and more organizations are taking responsibility on this and putting action to this. Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge in this development into the future that we just talked about?
The biggest challenge is to, where we riffed upon in the first instance, I think it's to be honest with yourself and to be courageous and to dare to step and to look behind the mask and to have conversations that people don't necessarily are not necessarily always comfortable with, both from both parties. But in order to develop, we need to step sometimes into the uncomfortable, and having that courage and not knowing that we don't know where things will lead, but it could potentially be fantastic, but it could also lead to a fiasco, but we don't know that. But we need to step into that that role of uncomfortability and showing up courageously, I think, every single day, or at least most of the days, and that is within everyone on an individual level and on an organizational level.
Yeah. Do you have a practical tip for a viewer or listener who is a leader and who wants to move towards that, having those conversations? But I mean, can be uncomfortable. It is about changing certain behavior can be scary. Do you have any practical tip if they want to start doing that tomorrow?
Well, I'm going to touch upon the item that you mentioned earlier, and that is to note down for yourself, what is my personal manifesto? What is it that I stand for? It's because the interesting part, in order to understand and help other people, we need to first have a better understanding of ourselves. And having that better understanding of who am I, what do I stand for, allows that space to say, all right, now I know who I am, but maybe someone else is different. Let's just have a conversation about that. And then that creates that meta awareness that is, I think, vital for having those conversations. So having a practical tip, write down, what do you stand for? What are your values? And just sit down, take a little bit of time away from your smartphone, laptop, go take a 24-hour off, go into the mountains or woods, or go to the sea, get your notepad and just write everything down that comes to mind. It's stepping away from technology, and then using that to say, well, now I know who I am. Maybe someone else is different. Is it, well, hey, what is your thoughts about work? What is your ambition? What are you excited about? What is your important goal? And having those conversations, as in, they don't have to be so big, the conversation. You just be having a very interesting conversation. It's like, hey, what excites you? It's like, I've been doing this in the weekend, or I've been doing this, and that was fantastic. What are you up to? It's like,
and once you have these conversations, you get to know somebody a bit better, and then you can support them, help them, coach them in developing. Great start. So I really like this conversation. I think we can go for another hour, but that will take a bit long. So maybe we need to do a second round in the future. A few closing questions that we ask many of our guests. One is specifically for you, because I read somewhere that you love to read personal development books. What's the best book you've read?
The best book I've read
on personal development, and maybe, I mean, there are quite a lot. That
many.
Best, let's say in the last 2 years.
In the last 2 years, I would say the one that had the most influence on me, and I think this is also a way to gauge if a book is good or you're actually changing something. It's the book from Matthew Walker on why we sleep. It is having that fundamental understanding of sleep is the foundation of everything that we do. And if you don't sleep well, it comes back in every single form, in work, in your nutrition, in your sports, in your love life, in everything that we do. It's the secret sauce, and the secret element of life is getting the amount of sleep that you need and the quality of sleep that you need. And Matthew Walker, in his book on why we sleep, gave me profound respect and value of the sleep I have, or sometimes I didn't get, and I try to get every single night now.
Nice. So how does your future look like? Where do you want to go?
It's an interesting question that I've been pondering myself as well for the last 1.5, 2 years. I have a very good thing, stable thing going on right now. And it's either one or two paths. It will always be with the development of people. So that will be a central component of what my life is all about. And then I still have to figure out what that will be. I don't know. I'm on the path that I'm going right now, and I'm supporting a lot of people, and that's going very well. And I can keep on doing this for another 5 or 10 years time. But equally, it might differ as well in 5 or 10 years time. And I'm perfectly okay with that. I don't know what the future will entail, but I know it will be with the development of people. Because that's what I'm truly passionate about, and that's what excites me, and that's why I get up in the morning. So,
and this is something that will not end. I mean, there's no technology going to replace that role.
No, definitely.
No. So this is my final question. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
So I can either be found on LinkedIn. It's the only social media tool that I use. I got rid of everything else. Mm-hmm. So on LinkedIn, Sander Markiet, or through my organization, My Work, My Life.co, or through the University of St. Gallen MBA, where we're doing fantastic programs to support the leaders of the future.
Nice. I see that our connection starts to
it starts to break up a little.
Yeah. So and this was the last question. So I want to thank you for your time and great insights. I really like to talk, and look forward to continue this conversation another time.
Likewise, and all the best. Appreciate it.
Thanks.